Hello. In this presentation, as Anna said, I will show the introduction to testing with Cypress, which we use for Collabora Online. And maybe let's start with what it is. It's the platform for integration testing. So it means it will test the full product. It's not like unit test when we test only some class or module inside application, but it uses the browser, and it's like simulation of what user would see on its screen when using the app. So it means it connects to the real server, and between the user, the browser, and the server, there is some kind of a network, which can be slow or fail, and also server can be busy and process more tasks. So if it is running on, for example, CI machine, there can be many of other tests at the same time, so it can be slower or faster. So it is especially important to create reliable tests which will not show many false positives. And for that, it's also good to understand how the JavaScript code work in the browser. I will not repeat the content. You can look and watch in the internet. So, for example, I know about a good presentation about this topic. It's on the YouTube. Here is the QR code, and it explains how the event loop works. For us, it's important to understand that we have many sources of different events or tasks in our application, like user interaction from mouse, keyboard, or there is a server communication which send us some messages, for example, when other user interacted with the document, or maybe document or the server application did something and informs us. And also we have our asynchronous events, which can be fired using set timeout, and then they appear in the queue. And yes, ordering is important for some tasks, so we should be aware of that when writing our tests. What is specific in our use case? I think the difference between our application and the web page, which can be tested, for example, with Cypress, is that we use some tricks. For example, user types into some hidden fields or inputs, and then we send that data to the server to process everything on the server, and we generate the document content, the tiles, which are sent back to the application, and we present that as a tiles on the screen on the canvas. So it's not like a user types something and we can just fetch the text. It's not possible. And yes, we because of that we have to use some tricks, and also bigger or smaller delay can happen because of that communication with the server. We don't, for example, validate everything in the browser. Also, what can happen if we interact with some elements, DOM elements in dialogues, they can be removed. So if we get the new content from the server, we will replace the old DOM element, what can also be important for Cypress. And what is Cypress? Everyone who already worked on online probably know, but I will show some important information. So that's the app for integration testing. When we run it in interactive mode, it looks like this. So in our actual browser, we get the preview of the Cypress, which runs some automation on our application, which is shown in the preview on the right side. And we can see all the events which are happening, like typing, clicking on different elements, and also if there is some error, we will see on the left side the status of the automated tasks, the errors. And what's really nice, we can just debug that like any other application. We can open the developer tools in the browser and check what is happening in our app. To run Cypress, we can open the Cypress tests directory in the online repository and do make check. We can select also some variant like check only desktop tests or mobile tests by adding some keyword. If we want to run the interactive mode with the browser visible on the screen, we should use run instead of check, because check only runs in the console, so browser is not visible. For debugging, we can use developer tools in the run mode, as I said. The tests which we add are automatically detected, so we don't have to add any makefile entries. They are in the integration tests directory. We have some helper functions which are common for many tests, like loading the document. It can be found in the helpers folder, and also we have a few visual tests which just do the screenshot and compare with the some image we want to get as a result. They are in the snapshots directory, and also if visual test will fail, it will also add to this directory the actual result, so you can compare what you get and what is expected, checking that directory. How the test looks like. It's just a JavaScript file which has some specific functions for Cypress. The first line we see is the spec name, which will appear in the Cypress report. It's the name for the whole file, and there we can define what can happen before each test. We have the section before each. It is also possible to add after each, but I think we don't use that. In before each, we usually load a file. Here is example with our helper, which does setup and load document with the specific file we have in our Cypress tests folder. And below we have a single test case, which starts from it. We can also mark some of the test cases to be skipped. Then we have to add it.skip, or for example, when we debug only one test because it fails, we can also do it.only, I think, which will run that single test. Yes, and we can have multiple of these test cases in one file. And yes, what we can do inside, we can get some element from the DOM using selectors, exactly like the selectors in jQuery or our query selector from JavaScript web APIs. And use some assertions, like here we check the style attribute and compare with some value. Yes, so we will write some assertions. Cypress uses the chai library, and in the documentation you can check all the possible assertions. There is a lot of them. You can check if element is visible, it has some property, has some text inside, or whatever you want. What is important about Cypress assertions is that if they will fail, they are automatically repeated. So it's not like in, for example, LibreOffice, we have the unit tests, which if they will fail, they will mark this test as failed. But in Cypress, it can happen that, for example, something didn't come from the server, so it's not yet ready, and we expect that new value. Cypress will wait a bit for the new value, and then after it appears, it will try again, and possibly it will pass. So we described the state we want to achieve, and Cypress should automatically wait for us when it's needed, and we shouldn't use the wait command to wait some specific time, like 3 seconds. We should always try to avoid that because possibly there is something wrong with our test if we need to do this wait, or maybe with the code. And also it's useful to stack the checks on each other, like in this example below, where we have get for mobile nav, and we have 2 assertions. It's useful because, like I said, we sometimes remove some elements on different messages, and if we would split that into 2 checks where 2 separate get happens, it is possible that we will not get state where single element has both of these properties, but first one will be checked with some old state, and then the second one will be checked with other element. So maybe it will be the incorrect state of the document. If we want to interact with the document, we can do what we can simulate what user could do, like clicking or typing into some fields, checking, unchecking checkboxes. In some cases, we can get errors when it's not possible. For example, element is disabled, then we will get error, or element was removed from the DOM, so it will be in detached state, so it always will fail. And also, if something is covered or not visible on the screen, then it will be detected, and also it will not allow us to do that. For example, if in the toolbar some icon is outside of the screen, we have to first scroll the toolbar, and then we can click on that element. And Cypress is by default as async, so it is important to not mix the async and synchronous code. We cannot expect that the previous commands for the Cypress are executed before our synchronous code, because what Cypress does, it creates a queue of this automation and checks. So everything should be adjusted to the Cypress expectation, and we should wrap as much as possible with the Cypress specific API. Yes, but it's still possible to interact with the raw elements, like there is then command, which will allow us to access the element which was previously found by Cypress selector. Like here we have the get for some link. Then there is then command, and inside this block we can interact with the raw element behind that. And after that, if we want to still use some assertions from the Cypress, we can wrap it again into, let's say, Cypress object with the wrap function, on which we can again use the Cypress assertions. And recently I was working on improving the Cypress, and I think it will be good to see where we had some non-stable tests and what we can do with them. Of course, I didn't fix all the problems, but at least the most failing ones. In this case, this is something what happens mostly on load. If there is desktop application tested, we open the sidebar, and what we checked was if the sidebar panel is visible, but actually it can take some time to show the content of the sidebar, because in JavaScript we show the panel, but server has to process everything and send back the content. So it was failing sometimes, that not allowing us to proceed to the actual test. So I just added the small assertion which check if the sidebar is not empty, and that fixed many of these cases when we failed to unload. The other thing was like in some cases we use these options, like here on the left side you see multiple and force. Force is for allowing to execute some check, not without any check for this detached state or that element is covered by something else. So it will allow us to do the click event on something which a regular user wouldn't be allowed to do. And also there is also the multiple selector, which allows to click on multiple elements which are found by the same selector. So of course it makes something bad for stability, because it breaks the checks in some for the correct state. So instead, we should always check, for example, if element is visible or not empty, like here, and select the one specific element we want to click, and then execute the click. So if all these checks are done, then we can just get the correct result without any forcing of avoiding the restrictions which are made by Cypress. In this case, there was a status bar spec in which we failed in different tests. So what was the problem? We started testing before the document actually was loaded and the whole UI was ready. So I added additional checks on when we start before we start testing, which check the status of the zoom value, because it appears when everything is ready. So if we have correct value there, we can start, and then everything should work. Because if we started before, that initial message was received later, and it was causing unexpected values in the zoom object or other buttons related to zoom, and it was breaking the test, but of course only sometimes. Another example is it would be good to avoid not necessary actions. Like in some tests, we switch to compact mode or notebook bar mode, but it's not important for that test. So it also makes the view to be reloaded because we changed the whole UI. So it was delaying everything. And in the original version, we had to wait 2 seconds before we start to check anything because it was still loading the correct mode. So I just removed that switch and also added additional check if the slideshow window is actually ready, is visible, and that allowed us to remove that wait. It not only makes the test more stable, but also makes it faster because Cypress will not wait 2 seconds, but only that time which is needed. And here is very useful method from the helper in calc, which types to some fields. But in previous version, we had a lot of weights and different things typed into that field. But of course, if we type 2 times into the same field, the same content, it will not help because we have more messages, more replacing of the content on the screen, and it makes things even more unstable. So it's better to have just one line which will type, and if it's required to clear before the field before the new content is typed, it is possible to do this in one command. So we will get only one update, which we can check after this is done, and we will have the more stable result because there is no 3 times of different values of the same field. And as I said, it is possible to write some synchronous code and also interact with the row elements. It is mostly used in the then block. Here was example of the helper function which scrolled the status bar to make the zoom items visible, and it was conditional. So we just grabbed the element for switching, for scrolling to the right, but inside we had the if condition. And only if it's visible, then we scrolled. So that function was used in many places, even when we didn't have to scroll right. And because of that, in some places when the UI was not yet ready, it was in different state than usual sometimes, and then it was doing some additional actions, and it was also breaking the stability. So I switched that, so now it requires to have the visible element, and if that element is actually visible only then we call this function, and now we have to remove that usage of that make zoom items visible if it's not needed, because it will fail. So we will do only the needed actions. And yes, that's what I did recently. Of course, I will not show all the bits which are in this Cypress testing framework, but because there is a lot of it, but I recommend to read some introduction, which is on their page in the documentation. It helps a lot to make the tests more stable. And if you see the failing tests, it's always useful to first check if we can avoid the usual wait, because it in the end it makes the tests still not passing in under some conditions. And if we stack these failures on each other, then CI becomes more annoying than useful because of that. So better to fix the tests and make them more stable in the first place. Thank you. That's all from me. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Yes, Szymon, thank you a lot for presentation. Questions, Andras?
No, thanks.
Attila?
Hello, just a small comment about assertions. You said it's wait for a while. I think it has a default time, how much it wait, and as far as I remember, we can change it in some cases if we think that some slotting will happen, then we may have to increase it.
Yes, exactly. Like you said, the default in the Cypress is 4 seconds. It's on the bottom, but we can change this with timeout, which is an option of get. So after this CY get and the selector, you can put comma and then put the dictionary with timeout. And I think we changed that by default for our tests. So in our case, it's always 10 seconds by default. But we can also change this for particular tests, assertions.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Miklos.
Could you please go to the last slide? Not the thank you slide, but the last real slide. Yeah, that one. I expected that, like, I'm not sure I understand what's happening there, and perhaps that would be useful to explain. Like, this function is scrolling to the right, and then based on some conditions, it will recursively call itself to scroll to the right again. So I expected naively that you check if something is not visible, and if it's not visible, then you keep scrolling to the right, so that at some point, eventually, it becomes visible. But that's not the code done. Like, there is no, the condition is the opposite there. So how does that work?
Yes, so because that function is for showing the right side of the status bar where the zoom options are, so it was always expected to scroll to the end of the status bar, to the right side. So it was calling recursively because of that. And
oh, this is the button. This is the button to do the scrolling itself. It's not the interesting button we want to see. Okay, that explains.
Yes.
Thanks. That's what I meant.
It scrolls that long as this button is visible, because of course we can do this check at some temporary point, let's say, and then it's required to do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Banobe.
I think the question I had was the previous one that Miklos just suggested, because I had a ticket about that, and that's scrolling to the right in the status bar. But Simon has explained it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Kellen.
Yeah, the top toolbar failure recently, when I did make run desktop on it, I noticed that I get this dialog that pops up that talks about your browser, can't do copy and paste, and you have to use these shortcuts instead. So I'm wondering, does that always happen, or is that just a kind of a failure of some of my setup? I mean, I just wondering. So if I do a run desktop, is it exactly the same as what happens in check desktop? And then is that, if I do it locally, am I going to be sure I get exactly the same thing that happens in CI? Or different versions? Is it just running whatever Chrome I happen to have available? So, how can I be sure I have the same environment that's happening in CI?
Yes, so I think that's also the problem, because I also see that if I do make run, it is a bit different than make check. In some cases, it passes the check, but doesn't pass the run. And also sometimes when we open with F12 the developer tools, it is becoming very slow or not loading the document in time. So it also fails because of that. And also Cypress allows to use different browsers and whatever you want. So it is possible that you run different version of a browser than CI, because it depends on what you have installed in the system.
Yeah. And is it listed any place kind of obvious somewhere in the logs what actually is being used in CI?
Yes, I think it is logged on the beginning, and also we have I think there is some environment variable where you can specify that, for example, you want to test with Firefox, or I remember some of people in our team had problems with the browser and we had to use that, but I don't remember exactly what was possible to do with that. I think maybe you specify the path to the program you want to run as a browser.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's great.
Thank you, Darshan. Gokai, Gulsha,
No questions. Thank you, Shimon.
Hussein, questions?
No, thanks.
Jaume, Joao.
No questions, thanks.
Okay, Justin, no questions. Rush, questions?
No, just one thing to add. There is a README file in Cypress folder, and there is a environment variable called Cypress browser. So you can change the browser in which Cypress is run. Cypress should run.
Oh yes, thank you. That was the option I was thinking about.
Thank you, Rush. Sahil, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Stefan?
No questions. Thanks for the nice overview.
Thank you. Banobe, do you have questions? Banobe?
I think on the browser part, some of the things some of the issues I also faced was it depends on the OS, on the operating system. So what I had was I couldn't run tests, but this was because I'm using Ubuntu. But what the problem was, Ubuntu has a library called AppArmor, and AppArmor was restricting browsers from opening, which was Firefox and also Chrome. So even if you use the option that Rush has posted, it couldn't work until when you disabled AppArmor from restricting Chrome or Firefox.
Oh yes, thank you. That's also useful information.
Thank you. Darshan, do you want to add something?
No, like I just pasted the command like which I use to just using UI. I select the browser like Chrome or Chromium or Firefox, and then select whichever Cypress test to run. Not using the command line, but we can search and uh, go through the test cases of like, different applications and separately run the mobile test and desktop test.
Okay. Thank you, Darshan. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
I have one more thing.
Yes, please, Rush.
So when someone whenever you want to add new test, uh, uh, once you write the test to make sure that it is stable, you must run it for, like, I usually do a for loop for 20 times, so it will run the same test 20 times to make sure that it is stable. But yeah, that's just a suggestion.
Yes, that's also useful. And I also retrigger that on the CI itself, because it's always different machines, so I can test locally a few times and then on the CI, so then we can see if it's stable or not.
And one more thing, if it can happen that if you do make run desktop, it will pass, but if you do check desktop, it will fail. So it's like you need to check both the cases.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Raj. Simon, do you have anything else to add, or?
No.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
I
Bye.